Part 43. Online Game Dungeon Master. Author, Buletin Lau Buletin Si Buletin Me. Chapter 421. The Teleportation Array in the north of the South African Star. Miss Monday, there are a total of 15,000 bottles of secondary healing potions, 5,000 bottles of strong healing potions, 3,000 bottles of medium effective recovery potions, 2,000 scrolls of various types, and whetstones for repairing equipment. Please count and accept them. In view of the shortage of various materials, it is estimated that no more support will be received within a week. Monday ordered the players around her to accept the supplies and then move to various fronts in the south. Although she heard some secrets, she was surprised by the amazing material mobilization ability of the Sunset Society. 23,000 bottles of potions are equivalent to the result of a medium to large country mobilizing all alchemists for a year of hard work, and a soldier can increase his chance of survival by more than 50% on the battlefield with just one bottle of potion. It takes a lot of energy to collect this amount of potions. The same is true for scrolls. Perhaps many people ignore the cooperative relationship established between players in the game. It is not as stable and useful as the real interest network built by money. However, if you pay attention to cultivating it in normal times, it will also be a considerable auxiliary once it is used. Once the crisis comes, the help of subordinate administrators from all over the country is not small. The big forces are often monitored and blocked, but the small ones are not. They can use the allies they usually make to purchase a certain amount of supplies. Even if it is just a little bit, the accumulation of a little will bring more hope to the war through the teleportation array. In any case, the situation is temporarily maintained with difficulty. The deep-rooted forces want to be eradicated only by internal collapse or long-term suppression. It is impossible to achieve it overnight. However, the impact on the development of the lower-level administrator players in the game is difficult to estimate. In a building in New York, USA. I doubt the wrong conclusions of the intelligence analysts. Ronald read the pages of information, frowned and said to the people below, "My intelligence personnel did not remind me that there would be such a result." Ronald is an out-and-out single-player player. He loves the COD series and the WC series, but sneers at online games. He only sees the economic value contained in them and does not like them. What is revealed in online games is naked profiteering and the law of the jungle. It is a reflection of the real world. For players, they hope that their spiritual world is pure and not polluted by others. This has caused some people to make mistakes in their considerations, which has a certain impact on the actions of the Mormon Consortium. Now, as the cash flow of major forces is strictly monitored, most of the funds have turned to small forces, and it is difficult to track them. They can monitor a state or a country, but they cannot monitor the whole world. Therefore, they can do nothing about the small actions of the door in private. We haven't lost yet, it's still early, we need an expert who is proficient in online games. Fortunately, Ronald realized the mistake in time and said so to the old man. He summoned his subordinates and his think tank and invited Mr. Jia, a famous old player in the online game industry, who is now 78 years old. Mr. Jia has been playing games for more than 60 years, and he is a firm supporter of the theory school. He often forgets to eat and sleep for a data, and he has taught himself a lot of subjects in order to thoroughly study the settings of the game itself. Moreover, the most important thing is that Mr. Jia is very willing to cooperate with the Mormon Consortium, while most real players do not like to deal with businessmen who are full of money. In their opinion, the only purpose of real businessmen is to seize the living space belonging to professional players and turn them into labor. Mr. Jia has not participated in the game for many years because of his advanced age and physical decline. He is unable to participate in high-intensity mental control for a long time and prefers to pay attention to and analyze the events in the game. He analyzed with his 60 years of experience, and the employees below were thoughtful. The practice of mobilizing downstream resources to fill the upper loopholes has certainly hindered your plan, But this plan is not perfect. The only city that can be teleported is Dusk City, which radiates to countless planes with it as the center. This is the importance of Dusk City. It no longer exists as a city, but has become a hub, the most critical link in all plans. The solidity of Dusk City is beyond doubt. So far, unless a big country goes all out, it will not be able to capture this underground city. And in terms of personnel, since most players are at the bottom, they do not have enough power and cannot achieve special goals by disintegrating their internal methods. It should not be carried out in the form of a game from the beginning. The war between the Lord and Son is still under the constraints of the rules of the game. The Mormon Consortium is in reality and is not very familiar. We cannot compete with them in the game. So, I think it was a mistake to choose the God of Brave to participate. Mr. Geo was blunt. The lower the gods, the closer they are to humans. They possess human desires and weaknesses. The weak gods of bravery will eventually become your enemies for their own benefit. The powerful gods are just the embodiment of the law. Whether they are living creatures or machines, they will only fully embody the content of the priesthood. The God of Justice will never cooperate with evil, because cooperating with evil means no longer holding the position of justice. The Goddess of Night will not yearn for light, not out of emotion but out of instinct, just like it is a recognized truth that water and fire cannot coexist. And the God of Brave is just a subordinate god. Therefore, doing this is likely to follow the script you wrote, but there is also a possibility that it will go off track. Mr. Geo spent some time popularizing knowledge to this group of online game illiterates. The kingdom is their battlefield. Mormon always wants to destroy the power in the Lord's game, but we just expose our shortcomings to the enemy. This is a mistake we made. Ronald somewhat understood what Mr. Geo said in his heart. It seems that we still have to start from reality and try to control the situation. I'm not very sure about this. It's not my specialty, Mr. Geo said modestly. After a while, his expression tightened. We have to try to break the rules of this game. Ronald knew that Mr. Geo didn't know anything about the door and heaven, but only knew the power symbolized by the Lord and Son. Ronald didn't know why the two powers were competing in a world that was comparable to the real world. Maybe it was just for peace. He knew that if the two powers really started fighting, no country could stay out of it. This would be a complete world war. Every country must participate in the war, otherwise it means giving up and being eliminated. Okay, we should consider it from this aspect. Ronald nodded and said to the people below. He held his head and thought. The Mormon Consortium did have an advantage in reality. In terms of funds and manpower, they were not inferior at all. The difference was that the Mormon Consortium and Heaven had hidden power that was several times stronger than theirs. Online game DungeonMaster. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 422. Nothing given, nothing gained. Ronald knew this clearly. And Mr. Geo used his experience to tell them a plan. It cannot be said to be very clever, but it has been tried and tested many times, spreading rumors. With the help of pictures and words to distort facts, the Mormon Syndicate has spent a century controlling the entire American media industry. The media is its mouthpiece. Only by controlling the media can the Mormons lurk under the water with peace of mind without worrying about being discovered. The truth is created, and simple rumors can be easily exposed. If you want to form a trend, it must be promoted by greater force and spread across the country. If the nearly 200 million players in the United States strongly resist the gate, then Twilight City will be isolated and helpless. As for the content, there are actually many kinds. There are many contradictory issues arising from decades of exchanges between countries, such as cultural conflicts, institutional conflicts, etc., all of which can be used to make an issue. The target is not the door, but the individual Lord. The Lord has his own special purpose in developing Twilight City, and things are not that simple. There are also experts in this field, and Ronald knows several of them. This is a conspiracy, a frontal attack, leaving the opponent with no way to avoid it and no chance to defend himself. Mr. Geo proposed another hidden plan, which is to directly use government channels to imprison people in the name of terrorists. This is a bad idea. Doing this, what he said, meant endless confusion. The Mormon Consortium had no need to do this, but only had to wait for the gate and heaven to fight to the death. The headquarters of the American Lock Consortium. Actually, what Shen Xian said is right. People should live for themselves first. This sentence is a bit selfish, but it reflects the living conditions of most people. Xiao Yan said seriously to his daughter Xiao Yunruo, "You can choose your own destiny. However, as an individual, I need to consider a group of people. The Lock Consortium has insufficient accumulation and looks a bit like a nouveau riche. It has some vague power in various countries and cannot be called overwhelming. Therefore, the consortium can be described as it's like walking on thin ice. As a force, Xiao Yan can only maintain a neutral attitude. If he helps one party, who knows what his fate will be? I can't do anything. The energy enrichment factory and spacecraft manufacturing factory under the consortium are handed over to you. You must have learned a lot during your days in Kingdom, and you must inherit them." Xiao Yan added 2 factories and enterprises with a total value of 28 billion to his daughter's name as a step of handover, transferring power bit by bit. For the Lock Consortium, they need to wait for the opportunity. The creation of the general trend requires full brewing, and they have to wait and see. "Dad, I've always wanted to ask you a question." "Is it about Shen Xian?" Xiao Yan smiled. How could he not know what his daughter was thinking? "You can do whatever you want," he answered openly. "Actually, it's about Shen Xian's life experience. Did he ever know us?" "It can be said that." Xiao Yan's calm face began to recall the past. "Actually, there is no need to know so much. The Lock Consortium was not long ago, 20 years ago. At that time, your father and your mother were not living in the United States. But in Shanghai, not a high-end community, there we met a family who came from other places. The owner was an old man, and there was a little boy who was obviously not his son or grandson. He was Shen Xian. I remember he was 4 or 5 years older than you. When you met him, he seemed very smart. He could make up some nonsense about arithmetic problems, ancient poems, and English. That's why your mother liked him very much. It's that simple." Miss Xiao thought doubtfully, saying this really disappointed her. "I'm afraid half of today's children can do arithmetic problems, ancient poetry, or English at the age of 4 or 5. It's too normal. That's not what attracts your dad. His ability is ordinary. But what makes me curious is that the old man who trained him seems to have used a very strange method to train him. It's not violent or cramming. In short, it didn't work at first, but it became more and more unbelievable to me later. So around a year when we moved away, when I talked with Shen Xian, he had already started to make money from online games. You know, an illegal online game that is not suitable for children. Minors are not allowed to play online games, but he somehow managed to get an account and earn thousands of dollars a month as pocket money. When asked about other things, he said that he had completed his junior high school studies. 10 years old, not too fast, not a genius. The only word that can be used to describe him is surprise. So I discovered the old man's potential power. I once wanted him to work in the Lock Consortium. Unfortunately, when I met him, I felt that I couldn't speak out and couldn't impress him. At that time, the Lock Consortium really had nothing, but the other party he saw what I was thinking and politely declined. In his room, you can find a large number of books, paper-based books, which are only found in wealthy families, as well as a lot of game equipment, such as PSPX, Xbox 360, and the game helmet of the latest construction and management online game Homeland. These are gaming devices that can only be found in wealthy people's homes. and I gave up the idea after I realized that his background was not simple. Of course, Shen Xian still came here often in those 2 years, such as playing games with you, playing house, hide and seek, etc. You yourself, it's normal not to remember. But who is that old man? Shen Xian seems to be the only second-level administrator of the section. Could it be that the old man is the legendary first-level administrator who should have died long ago? Miss Yao asked one by one. Women are always very curious, so they are very interested in these gossip things. It should be. There is no evidence. He did not admit or deny it. Shen Xian may just be an unknown orphan. If you know his parents, you would have recognized them long ago, or at least contacted them, instead of being so indifferent. Xiao Yan blocked Miss Xiao's mouth. Don't ask so many questions. Why don't you explore it yourself? It doesn't matter, you are all like that. He rarely kept the last sentence in his heart. Xiao Yan finally brought the topic back to the topic. After inheriting the energy enrichment plant and the spacecraft manufacturing plant, you need to cultivate your own strength and hold power in your hands. In every newly emerging organization, there will always be some old people who think highly of themselves and want to seize power. There is no right or wrong question, but you have to do it. There is also a point. I think a new confrontation will begin in the next few days, Xiao Yan predicted like a prophet. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Buletin Lao Buletin Si Buletin Me. Chapter 423. At the seaside of the other plane, a storm raged, and a giant beast that was hundreds of meters long and could not see the end spread the anger of nature, creating huge red waves that hit the rugged cliffs. In the darkness, spots of light gradually appeared under the sea, as if something was moving. The light moved on the seabed, like a group of fireflies, but also like a large army, stretching for dozens of kilometers, advancing layer by layer towards the coast. On the lighthouse by the sea, the tower keeper looked anxiously at the movement on the seabed, screamed, and the camp attribute changed to evil, and then his eyes were dull and motionless, turning a blind eye to the abnormality in front of him. On the coast, the monster-like Naga broke through the waves in purple-red coral-like armor. Their weapons were even more terrifying, as huge as ogres and as flexible as elves. The Naga in front of them were natural warriors, a group of fallen creatures born to kill and create chaos. The storm stopped without anyone noticing. The entire coast was occupied. The tide of hundreds of thousands of Nagas occupied the entire field of vision. Looking around, the solemn atmosphere would make people feel terrified. Shen Xian stood in the middle and was very inconspicuous. He was still familiar with the control of the Nagas. Although he got the army of Thunderscale Lord Fenmai in exchange, it was not so easy to use it well. The Nagas are amphibious. As long as the environment is not too dry, their battle will not be affected. It took a few days to transfer, and 300,000 Nagas were obtained. They are divided into several professions. The warrior profession includes 2 types, Wave Walker and Frenzy Guard. The former is a lightly armed unit, wearing leather armor, using short weapons, such as swords and daggers, moving quickly, relatively low level, hovering at level 45, while the latter is a heavily armed unit that can fight against several units at the same time. In terms of strategic application, it is more like cavalry. In terms of speed, Naga warriors cannot be as fast as cavalry, but they can dive and use the cover of rivers to quietly penetrate into the city center. Large cities have moats and sluices, but the defense is generally weak, which is the best position for Naga to break through. As for mages, there are 50,000 of them, of which 40,000 are mixed professions of warriors and mages, coordinators. Their main use is not to fight alone, but to be mixed into warriors to greatly improve the combat effectiveness of soldiers. The other type is called marine sorcerers, which is one of the few magic professions that possess powerful destructive power. To make the best use of it, you must master the advantages of Naga. Shen Xian knows that knowing does not mean that you can apply it. Everyone can talk about war on paper, but few people can make plans. After lying dormant for a few days, the situation in the north was not good, but it did not deteriorate to the extent that he had to control it personally. There was one thing: there was not much chaos in the parish of the Sunset Society. Perhaps it was because of the past history. The Pale Hand had attacked the north countless times, but the final result was often because of the resolute attitude of the northern monarchs, and they chose to retreat, fearing that the north would become a country of death with tens of millions of undead souls. Even the god of death did not have such an idea. The development of faith is not a massacre. God punishes his opponents and cannot eliminate all the unbelievers. Therefore, Shen Xian was able to waste a lot of time to master the characteristics of Naga. Yesterday, he saw some posts attacking him on the internet, accusing him of starting a war at will, which caused a large number of local American players to suffer heavy losses. Many small professional players lost all their belongings because of the failure of the war and the occupation of the territory. The number was about hundreds of thousands, and a fairly easy to understand player distribution map was given. According to whether there are American players in each territory, the density of players in an area is calculated by dividing it by the area of the territory. In the south and the north, the total number of affected players on the continent can reach nearly 1 million. Multiplying by the average investment of players, how many temporarily penniless poor people will be created by the pressure of life after the defeat, and finally concluded that this war will at least cause American players to lose tens of billions of dollars, and GDP growth will drop by a few tenths of a percentage point, etc. In short, the article expounds a fallacy from a professional perspective. There are many such posts every day, because they are caused by arguments between players behind the scenes supported by each game master, or they may be dissatisfied players who simply want to vent their emotions. If it were just that simple, it would be fine. More posts appeared the next day. The biggest psychological pressure given by public opinion is psychological pressure, such as condemnation of conscience, which has a significant effect. The strangest thing is that the post he saw yesterday was actually pushed to the front page of the website and had millions of hits. Not only that, comments about this incident appeared vaguely in regular newspapers. A large number of players wasted their money on spiritual expenses to benefit players in other countries and support the construction of other countries, which is really disappointing. There are countless true and false comments. Hundreds of millions of players have participated in the discussion of this war that affects the other planes. The scale is even greater than the last time the Saint Otero's empire invaded the broken continent. This is an obvious war of public opinion. The pressure on the government and the people is very heavy. Things that shouldn't happen may happen at any time. There has always been distortion and fabrication of facts in public opinion in history. There is no way to crack it. For civilians in a disadvantaged position, public opinion is the most direct platform for them to receive information. If you want to distinguish the truth from the false, you must at least have a pair of eyes that can distinguish the truth, which is difficult. Unfortunately, most of the other parties' responsibilities are in the United States. The first one is what Shen Xian neglected. Among the millions of players in the other dimension, American players can actually account for 1/3. The other is that the Mormon Consortium only controls the public opinion of the largest country. For other countries, such as China, Russia, France, Germany, and other countries that are not closely related to them, there is no wave. There are even players who support the actions of the Lord, and the purpose of the Mormon Consortium is only to restrain the behavior of American players and prevent them from doing business with the Lord. Because doing so is enough to create enough trouble for the operation of Dusk City, and it can also enable them to achieve their desired goals. And there are countermeasures, but they are definitely not powerful enough, and there is no way to immediately shut up the mouths of civilians. However, it is not enough to rely on public opinion to curb them, otherwise, wouldn't Mormon be lawless in the United States? Lord, the army is ready and can start marching. A 120-level Naga high-level warlord umbrella appeared in front of Shen Xian. His physique can tear apart the dragon in the sky, and his AI is also very high for war. He activated the Tide Halo, increasing the underwater movement speed by 10%. Then, more than 200,000 Naga troops swaggered towards the nearby village, while another part of the Naga dived underwater and headed further along the river. No one noticed that the connection between the south and the center was cut off by the invisible hand. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 424. I know Frostmourne chatted privately with Shen Xian, and after finishing, he showed a trace of imperceptible joy, then opened the map bar to study the situation in the north, and in the south. The southernmost country, a large-scale Naga landing operation began. The Naga tribe, players rarely have experience fighting against the Naga tribe, and they never thought that a marine creature could cause them such huge damage. In just 2 hours, 23 villages and 3 towns in the south were slaughtered without any mercy, which seemed to foreshadow the other party's determination and decisiveness. About 50,000 residents died, which was only the number for one day in the game. On the second day, that is, 2 hours later, the southern seaport of Lattice was attacked, the city Lord Marin died in battle, 40,000 city defense troops were destroyed, and the remaining more than 100,000 people were driven to the ocean. Under the manipulation of the Naga warlock, a grand sacrifice ceremony was held, and the living people were directly offered to the devil in exchange for incomparable energy to support the construction of the city. The tens of thousands of demons summoned by Lattice were transformed into a fortress. The dark clouds in the sky turned into a seductive red color. Big demons, lust demons, and other hell creatures flew back and forth, and the Naga army was like a fish in water. They fought in the humid areas similar to the plains and the fallen areas similar to hell. The attribute enhancement was at least 10%, and they did not encounter any opponents at all. The city is currently in the 4th stage. The scale of countless city defense facilities is beyond imagination. There are many layers of protection, and even a large number of fortresses, in order to ensure that the enemy will suffer greater casualties without support. Fighting around with the fortress as the center, the Naga will have no opponent as long as the elite of the Pale Hand and the Free Alliance do not participate. Moreover, Shen Xian took the risk of dividing the troops into dozens of routes. There were dozens of points fighting in a period of time, and each point dispatched Naga with sufficient strength. So far, Heaven, who has not thought that the enemy can borrow a navy, is helpless. The North has increased its resistance to confuse the other side, and the players on WTP have done their best to cooperate with the South. The current situation is that the sect is no longer afraid of the punishment of the gods. Steele reported. Unlike most players, he rationally believed that the Lord would not cause greater casualties to the South, although so far, nearly 100 territories have suffered devastating damage, resulting in losses of hundreds of millions. I am also not interested in Mormon support. Sun expressed contempt. I was born in the United States, but I don't think I'm an American. It's really an overconfidence to use anyone's values to constrain our behavior. Sun then added, the war in the other plane still depends on the attitude of the god of plague and the god of death. However, since the other party is no longer timid, it must have found a behind-the-scenes participant with enough weight. I think it would be difficult and not worth it even if the war wants to continue. Sun said to himself, the gate gave us a perfect enough answer, and we can only pick up some small benefits. I will let Sliver take charge of the work in other places. Keep a close eye and contact the Pale Hand. This is not our war, Steele. Overnight, many American players boycotted the Lords. They could not express their ideas with actual actions, but they could use other methods, such as writing a novel and drawing a comic, which are all good ways to attack opponents. Among these players, the biggest one is probably Sheep, which has always had business dealings with Dusk City. On the surface, Heaven and Dusk City are at war, but Sheep still exports a large number of potions to Dusk City behind the scenes. As long as there is interest, there is nothing that cannot be friends. And Sheep suddenly announced to stop supplying medicine to Dusk City. Many Americans thought Sheep was a patriotic hero, and the external conflicts in Sheep's territory were unimpeded. But the fact is that Sheep is still secretly exporting medicine to Dusk City, just in a different way, such as pretending to be robbed. So for these old-timers, it is normal to lie with open eyes, as long as they feel it is necessary. Players from other countries have more business dealings with Dusk City. As the hub of the underground world, the importance of Dusk City is indispensable. Therefore, for small players, their core interests are not to choose a new backstage, but to cooperate with Dusk City. So far, a few days have passed, and the public opinion pressure created by the Mormon Consortium has not yet formed sufficient momentum. As long as there is no general trend, Americans who dare to burn the national flag will naturally be more willing to pursue personal freedom. What the Mormon Consortium needs is to further improve and modify the public opinion offensive to adapt to the complex situation. Shen Xian selected several relatively honest players from the WTP player team in the north to assist him in the southern battle, enriching the senior generals and making the battle seem easy. No matter how bad the WTP players are, no matter how unfamiliar they are with the battle of the Marine Army, they are still better than most Nagas. In terms of command ability, I am afraid that only a few races known for their wisdom can be compared. One day later, the problem in the south spread among the player circle. The NPCs who did not know the truth were commanded by the players to set up defenses everywhere, such as sealing the sluice gates and adding guards to patrol the river, all of which were favorable measures to prevent the Nagas from taking advantage of sneak attacks. Players have to stay awake because the war is about to reach their hometown. In order to prevent the city they have worked hard to build from being downgraded or disappearing, they have no way to give up their desire to continue the game. The south has become the stronghold of evil forces, thanks to the 300,000 Naga. The god of plague lay in his dream space full of poisonous weeds and smoke, looking down at his country of faith with a panic look on his face. About 500 territories to the south were a mass of maroon. There is neither grass nor wild beasts living there, and the smell of sulfur permeates the sky. Some newborn little devils can be seen flying across the sky, gnawing on the corpses that have not yet rotted on the ground, and some are busy pushing boulders and trees to build cities, trying to turn the world into hell. How abominable! It was really unbearable for him. Could it be said that any devil supported their war? The god of plague thought that the recent actions of the necromancer traveling north made him uneasy, but if it was true, he might have to tell his teacher. The god of plague left quietly. Before leaving, he made a vicious oath to sow the seeds of death in the south. He is the god of plague, and he has mastered the power of death that scares mortals. The devils in hell cannot escape his curse. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 425. Shen Xian checked the strange wounds on the devil's body. The muscles were rotting and oozing out poisonous pus, which was suspected to be a symptom of the plague. The specific effect of the plague is to reduce life recovery, which may even become negative, and to reduce the upper limit of life value, which can slowly kill the unit. So far, more than 1,000 devils have died out of thin air, and nearly 10,000 are struggling on the verge of death. The impact on the controlled area is not great, because the environment of hell can provide the devil with stronger vitality and the ability to resist negative states. Once they leave, they will go to other places and such strange things will occur frequently. There is no problem with the Naga core. They are at a higher level and are not easily affected by the plague. Shen Xian privately speculated that because his massive offensive behavior angered the god of plague, He used a 14th level divine spell to destroy his actions. Moreover, for his believers, the spreading plague will not affect people. When facing the gods, you must be prepared to bear the punishment, but the arrival of the Naga Corps did ease the situation, and it is not easy to retreat. Shen Xian knew that the plague seemed terrible, but its effect on demons was far less terrible than that on humans. He urgently isolated the demons infected with the plague and took necessary measures. There were not many of them, so he ordered a large number of demons with extremely high negative resistance to go to the control area to place the statues of doom, accelerate the transformation of the surrounding areas, and build more defense facilities, even production facilities, to fight a protracted war. The negative effects of the plague disappeared after more than 10 hours. The Naga itself did not have much equipment, and the war consumption was not large. Food and other things were all solved on the spot, and there was no economic pressure at all. He brought 300,000 Nagas with the idea of burning jade and stone together. With the tens of thousands of demons summoned in recent days, I believe that even if the Pale Hand wants to move him, the premise must be to evacuate the Northern Army back. The above facts gave him ample room for development. At present, on the southern coast, there are demons everywhere, and the kingdom of faith in gods has long been completely disintegrated. Big cities became dens for the devils, small villages were slaughtered, and some strategically important ones were transformed into new city defense facilities. The management and construction of devils are completely different from humans, and also different from underground cities, with obvious aggressiveness. 3 hell gates were built in the city of Lattice with the work of tens of thousands of devils. Small hell gates cannot be used for purposeful transmission. They are similar to the role of space cracks. A group of wild devils will be transmitted to the other plane for them to call at fixed intervals. It is certainly not enough to rely on Naga alone. If a Naga soldier dies, you can't get a second one, or let them reproduce. This is not something that can be done in a short time. You can only rely on low-level devils. When Shen Xian was quietly paying attention to the god of plague and wanted to understand the thoughts of the god of death, a voice sounded from the depths of his soul. "Lord, your behavior is really despicable." The voice of Thunder Scale Lord Fenmai, his terrible figure even swayed in Shen Xian's consciousness, transmitting waves of terrible power. Fenmai was angry because the god of plague was attacking him. Countless armies of the kingdom of God suddenly appeared in his territory deep in hell. He controlled millions of fallen Nagas, but he still felt that he could not completely ignore the anger of a god. Although he killed tens of thousands of apostles of God and harvested their souls, it was still not enough to vent his anger. The reason why the god of plague vented his anger on him in hell was entirely because of the Naga army he sent out. In other words, it could only be that Shen Xian consciously induced him to track down Fenmai's whereabouts, otherwise it would not be enough to explain such an abnormal thing, thus catching the unprepared Fenmai off guard. Of course, hell is hell after all, not the paradise of gods. After he destroyed the army of gods, the powerful fallen power contained in the world of hell itself began to erode the delicacy that came, a god, causing the god of plague to flee back in embarrassment. Facing Fenmai's questioning, Shen Xian said politely, "We need cooperation, Mr. Fenmai." Cooperation, Fenmai had guessed the result long ago, but being fooled was definitely the greatest shame for the devil. Fenmai knew that there were many Naga lords in hell, and under normal circumstances, he would not be caught at all. "I need more souls," he began to ask for a price, and his moody face immediately forgot what happened just now, because he had a falling out with the fallen orc Leda, and the war between the two made Fenmai's revenue a little tight. "Of course, I will provide 100,000 souls. Okay, I will try to stop the damn plague god." After a negotiation between Fenmai and Shen Xian, he secretly decided to teach the Lord a lesson. It was easy for him to divert the attention of the plague god, but the plague god was the apprentice of the god of death. If he accidentally angered the god of death, things would still be a little difficult. Fenmai was thinking about a new conspiracy. The war in the south continued after a brief rest of more than 10 hours. The Naga continued to move northward, creating one killing after another. However, compared with the sneak attack at the beginning, the speed was only about half now. If the Naga army attacked some solid cities, they would suffer heavy losses unless they were fully equipped and conducted sufficient investigations. However, this could not be done when the situation did not wait for anyone. The balance of victory and defeat was gradually reversed. Sliver did a good job. The situation in other planes is generally peaceful. However, the gate cannot be perfect after all. We can still get a lot of benefits from them or others. Sun sat in front of the screen and browsed a long list of reports from various worlds, thinking in his heart, weighing the gains and losses. In general, the gains are not much, but it is better than nothing, and as a commander, he must know how to grasp every bit of benefit and not let it go. In addition, the holy crown of the Death Monarch was lost and synthesized into the Necromancer orb by the Lord. For them, there is no other benefit in the other plane except the struggle for faith. It is impossible to fight just for the sake of war, and it is impossible to give up the entire forest for a sapling. The other part is the rebellion in the west. The oppression is not small, but unfortunately the stamina is insufficient, which is related to the timely adjustment of the Mormon Consortium. Now there is only one problem left. If it is grasped well, a peaceful situation can be established. If it is not grasped well, I am afraid that the end of the war will never end. Virtual Conference Center. Let's understand the situation in recent days. And Mormon's little moves? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 426. Faced with the sudden scandal, the Mormon Consortium was in a state of panic. The secret base on Mars involved too many things, bringing the consortium hundreds of millions of direct profits and even more derivative profits every year. However, Ronald could not accept that a base that was under strict protection and could not be observed by astronomical observatories under normal circumstances could be discovered. You know, there are only a few short days in a year to have the opportunity to see the true face of the base. At other times, observations will fail due to the weather and climate on Mars. Now, he is busy dealing with various events. International influence can be resolved through negotiations or transactions, but at home, facing the growing opposition, it is a major blow to the president's approval rating, which will affect the Mormon Consortium's plans for the next 4 years. Another point is that the Mormon Consortium did not focus on the US market after the results of Mars research were transformed into actual products, as well as some restrictive regulations related to the government, which led to public opposition. Among them, several important ones have good health effects, can delay aging, etc., and are very effective. Americans have to pay several times the price to buy American-made products from abroad. The above facts make them irrefutable. There is no need to repeat the specific events. It is enough to know that Mormon had to spend a lot of effort to protect themselves from being hit hard, so that their plans for the Lord had to be stranded indefinitely. A few days later, more than 1,000 territories on the southern coast had been converted, of which 3/4 were parishes of the Pale Hand and 1/4 were parishes of the Free Alliance. It's time to negotiate. Either choose to perish together or choose to coexist peacefully, and both parties, or the people behind the scenes, all hope so. Because they are not without enemies. The peace talks between the two sides were quickly launched. According to the statistics of the losses of both sides, more than 3 million residents were killed or injured, and more than 1 million soldiers were killed or injured. It is indeed unrealistic for the war to continue. Still, based on the Falling Star Lake, which has always been the dividing line between the two major forces in the north and the south, the religious army in the south must push back to the south of the Falling Star Lake without reservation, and the Naga Corps on the south coast of the north must retreat to the small island on the edge of the continent, away from the center of humanity. This is the tone set by both parties. There is no problem in general. The Naga Corps is not invincible. Moreover, the souls prepared for Fenmai have long been completed. Relying on a large number of sacrifices and the support of faith, Shen Xian's current level is almost 133. However, when the two sides were preparing some negotiations in private, the small western countries Mandela and AFK sent envoys hoping for peace talks. The God of Heroes did not want to have millions of believers taken away after so much difficulty. He had spent a lot of divine power in the diocese, not only to form a powerful religious army, but also to demonstrate miracles many times to consolidate faith. Therefore, although the territory seemed small, it was actually not easy to deal with. Everyone had to accept the new negotiator. There was also AFK. The two major resistance forces in the West were united. In the final analysis, they were instigated or controlled by the Mormon Consortium, and the merchant nature of the Mormon Consortium was once again reflected. A few days ago, they were still irreconcilable, but now the two sides have started close cooperation without any blame. Leaving such a place is not without benefits. If the continent is divided into three major forces, it will be conducive to maintaining balance, and it can also give the Sunset Society and the Dragon Vein Society enough time to control the diocese. There are a lot of specific matters involved. As the weaker party, Mandela and AFK had to sign a lot of agreements that were more disadvantageous. The main content includes that both parties shall not develop the church beyond the agreed scope. In this way, the potential believers in the parish controlled by the Sunset Society and the Dragon Vein Society can reach 30 million, which is half more than that in the other world, and it is relatively easy to convert. Another is that Mandela and AFK need to open the sale of iron ore to the north. According to local prices, the territories where the God of Brave and AFK split away produce iron ore at a price less than half of some mines in the north, and the quantity can maintain the demand of about 15,000 territories. After many negotiations, the North allowed the existence of such a traitorous force in the West. The Northern King himself had no idea, and even through the large-scale import of iron ore, the army's strength could be improved. Anyway, the two major churches did not have much objection. The next week is the specific implementation, such as withdrawing troops, opening up trade routes, etc. The Southern Free Alliance did not react much. It was secretly controlled by Heaven, and the other side, the Pale Hand Death God, was flawless. The country faced the deterrence of the Naga and could only watch the Naga Legion return to an isolated island in the ocean. The island, together with about 200 territories in the surrounding ocean, will become a fishbone stuck in the throat of the southern countries in the future, preventing them from attacking the north at will. Finally, I can rest for a few days. Shen Xian and Miss Yao stayed on the terrace of the dozens of floors of Dusk City, looking at the evil totem in the distance. After working day and night, a new miracle was finally completed. The military strength of Dusk City can be further improved in the future, and further train 3-turn elites. Although the underground city cannot develop an amazing population, Dusk City has several advantages in talent training. Yes, the war in the other dimension can finally come to an end for the time being, Miss Yao said with anticipation. Twilight City invested a lot of manpower and material resources in this war, but the consolidation of the extra-dimensional parish also strengthened the status of Twilight City that it will never fall. At present, Twilight City is still surrounded by enemies, but if you want to break through by surprise or strong attack, you must have a god to participate fully. And the gods are not fools. How can they give up their divinity because of a city? Unless it is an existence like Myrandal, it is too dangerous. Many high-end players of Twilight City stood on the terrace overlooking this great city with satisfaction on their faces. I am afraid that there is nothing more proud of them than a mythical city. Even if this is just an illusion, the name of Twilight City is still a dream in the hearts of players all over the world. Protecting this city is the wish of every player and NPC, just like their own children, and never allow it to fall into the flames of war. Players began to think about what kind of future Twilight City needs. They proposed different design plans and made their own contributions to a dreamlike dungeon. Everything needs to be revealed after final approval. At least, they know that the next strategic plan of Dusk City will be announced soon. Online game DungeonMaster. Author, Bulletin Lau Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 427. The geographical location of each large city is the top priority. The ruins of the Element Gate itself occupy a spatial advantage, and the central location of the Dusk Hills gives Dusk City a unique transportation advantage. Continuing horizontal expansion does not seem to be very popular. A larger city means looser connections between each other, and the defensive barrier of the Element Gate itself is of a fixed size. Therefore, the next step of Dusk City's development may have to move vertically. Just like the Fallen Temple. The original city's planning is obviously quite reasonable, so after slightly relocating and demolishing the buildings in the surrounding areas to open up new space, a new round of construction plans for Dusk City began. The first step is to open a passage in the rock and soil layer between the first and second underground floors to connect to the second underground floor. This place itself was part of the underground maze of Dusk City, so it is not too difficult to implement. The second step is to create a new space near the passage, using hundreds of thousands of inferior demons to dig out a layer equivalent to the size of Dusk City and about 10 meters high. Tens of thousands of houses can be built here. Due to environmental reasons, it may not be upgraded to a very high level. However, the builders of Dusk City did not intend to build it into a prosperous place where nobles gather, but only to provide more underground space for urban construction. The third step is to use the magma drawn by the Sin Totem to build a moat at the bottom of the city. It is not a normal moat, because this magma river used to block the army completely surrounds the city and flows down little by little, and finally flows to the second underground floor. In order to prevent the defense force from being weakened due to the destruction of the maze, the area directly below Dusk City on the second underground floor was completely sealed off to prevent the Dark Elves below. Now Dusk City is no longer bullied by others, so the Dark Elves of Blood Moon City rarely come to sneak attack them, fearing that they will lose all their money, but they still have to prepare for the unexpected. Another point is that the tens of millions of cavemen on the second underground floor are not under their control, but thanks to the rooting of faith, there are currently more than 15 million cavemen who provide 5 million units of food per day for the entire Dusk City. The second underground floor is like the back garden of Twilight City. No one dares to move the players on the first underground floor, except for the dishonest Dark Elves. Unfortunately, the Dark Elves are relatively poor, and plundering them will definitely not recover the cost. Unless it is for reputation, there is really no benefit in attacking them. We can only use indirect control methods to occupy this area, so as not to affect satisfaction, civilization, and other related attributes. Twilight City has taken a long time to develop slowly. If they don't develop the piece they have finally won, they will lose a lot. A month later, he reached level 135. At this time, the amount of experience required for upgrading has reached tens of billions or even hundreds of billions. It is impossible to reach demigod by practicing for a few years with conventional methods. Therefore, if you want to be strong, you must form a church to accumulate the power of faith. During this period, no major events happened. With more and more abundant funds, some ordinary level technologies were upgraded to level 10. Now the resource output, taxation, and other efficiencies of Twilight City are all standard 200%. The only thing is that Dusk City drove back the army in the desolate city area. These armies continued to fight in the underground world under the instructions of Mylendal, which put a lot of pressure on the surrounding players and made the underground world chaotic. In addition to not daring to provoke some big cities in the north, they visited many players' territories, and there were many masters among them. After continuous fighting with the underground world, they became more and more flexible. In addition to the reduction of 1/3 of the army, it was still a very threatening army. In view of the fact that they could not be allowed to continue, or the goal was achieved, Dusk City joined forces with several NPC cities such as Desolate City, Lost City, and Peak Fortress, as well as player cities, to attack and use thundering means to expel them. Shenxian also tried to find the remaining soul centers. It was really inefficient to rely on divination that could only be used once every 72 hours, and relying on manpower was like looking for a needle in a haystack. There were hundreds of planes with players, and the unknown was estimated to be tens of thousands. Even if the door could not invade the internal database, there would be no way to know the secret. Moreover, the confidentiality mechanism of the internal database is still a technology provided by the gate. Even if you master the trick, it will take more than 3 years of calculation. In early December, the envoy of the Fallen Temple summoned Shenxian, and a new task from the 3 masters came to his hands. Task 1, Hospitality. Belmont, a famous adventurer from the South Sea Alliance, wants to steal the treasure of Twilight City from deep into Twilight City. He will come with several like-minded companions, please be careful. Elite level, reward experience 5 billion, reputation 20,000, get the title of Adventurer's Tomb, improve the degree of attraction of adventurers in the territory, and improve the reaction AI of patrol guards. The territory with the title can get the territory attribute bonus. For example, the Fallen Temple itself is a title, and the real name of the Fallen Temple does not actually exist. Task 2, Array. Build a new Miracle Fallen Barrier, which is equivalent to a level 15 magic. The territory attributes within a range of 500 kilometers increase the attributes suitable for evil combat, increase attack power by 5%, defense power by 5%, attack speed by 5%, and movement speed by 5%. This miracle requires 500 million gold, 10 million magic crystals, and the cooperation of at least 100 mages above level 90. Elite level rewards 5 billion experience points and 30,000 reputation points. The third task was the one that revealed the plot of the 3 masters, but it was just that he was a little reluctant to give it to Shenxian to execute. Mission 3, Rescue. Send troops to the ancient fortress on the 4th underground level to rescue the trapped Hell Lord Ilkanbira. The fortress is located on the 4th underground level 3,900 kilometers south of Twilight City. Ilkanbira is a devil who exists beyond the main material plane. He is level 150, but his attributes are half hero and half god. He also participated in the last Doomsday War and was sealed for more than 2,000 years to learn many secrets. Elite level, rewards 5 billion experience and 40,000 reputation. Only after the 3 tasks are completed can the new task be continued. Shenxian sat in the large conference hall, looking at the noisy players below. The first thing we have to face is the first and second tasks. After the first one is completed, only then can we proceed to the third one. Let's start with the second one first. This is a construction task, mainly to strengthen the guard force in the surrounding areas of Twilight City. We must prepare in advance. Twilight City has enough wealth to gather 100 level 90 people. The above mages are a little more difficult, but you can hire free mages from other forces. Also, I looked at the material list. In addition to the huge amounts of gold and magic crystals, there are also a large number of rare materials. The rare resources snatched from the big fortress are about to be exhausted. They can barely support it. There is only a kind of magic silver. It is a rarer material than mithril and can be made from mithril. However, based on the current cost, approximately 600 million units of mithril are needed to provide 600,000 units of magic silver. Online game DungeonMaster. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 428. Free came out and smiled at everyone. If possible, we can transfer the mithril to the fire element plane for smelting. Only 30 million mithril will meet the demand. The characteristics of the fire element plane make the temperature here extremely high. Even the most difficult to melt metal will exist in a liquid form. Combined with the fire element that is immune to fire and special technology, there is indeed hope to convert mithril into magic silver through new methods. The contradiction is that freeze ring can only store a few thousand units of items. It is impossible to transfer mithril through the ring alone. Mithril only exists in the earth element plane. So, according to this, does it mean that a new teleportation array needs to be established? The players estimated the advantages and disadvantages. The tasks of the three masters received by Shen Xian have their own advantages, but they have different calculation methods according to different contribution degrees. For example, a level 90 mage who participates in the arrangement of the magic array can get 20 million experience points, 300,000 gold points, and the reward of the skill experience of magic array learning. The goblins who build the most basic infrastructure can get 50,000 experience points and 600 gold points. Players who participate in the collection of materials or the planning and design can also get a share. Therefore, most players are willing to build the Fallen Barrier. Although this will consume decades of tax revenue from Dusk City, the Fallen Barrier does not simply affect Dusk City, but also their territory. There are significant bonuses for dark elves, humans, dwarves, gnomes, orcs, and barbarians. Even hostile demons have a small bonus because the target is evil. To build a new teleportation array, you need to use the magic power of Miss Xiao and Mist Erlin. Expenses are not a problem. The important thing is the location. The ruins of the elemental gate connected to the fire elemental plane, now the fire elemental palace, is believed to be a very good choice. The fire elemental plane where Wendy is located is actually a fairly large world. With Frey as a link, the cooperation between the two sides can definitely go further. After spending a lot of time discussing the construction of the Fallen Barrier, the first task came next. Belmont, an adventurer from the South Sea Alliance, a level 133 hero-level bounty hunter, and his partner, a total of 5 people, formed a strong team to explore the dungeon. And this time they reached out to Twilight City. If they were not eliminated and their goal was achieved, the reputation of Twilight City would plummet. In fact, no player dared to underestimate the adventure team composed of 5 people. Professional matching, small goals are secondary, the important thing is that each of them has a level no less than that of a lord, and it is too easy to deceive the defense of the barrier and the surveillance of the magic tower. As long as they pass through the outer areas with layers of protection, they can blend into the residents and then wait for an opportunity to attack. And these adventurers must have a high level of related auxiliary skills such as camouflage, negotiation, surveillance, intelligence collection, and trap removal. If they are not careful, even tens of thousands of troops may not be able to defend. The second thing obviously made many players very worried. Isn't the intelligence power of Dusk City very strong? How about we send assassins to deal with them in advance? What a joke! If we were a member of the Southern City Alliance or the declined Noble Alliance, we might be able to get the news. Besides, even if we kill them in advance, it might lead to the inability to complete the mission. That's what it means literally. Do you think the system dares to deceive us? But if the adventurer team did not die in Dusk City, but in other places, it is reasonable to give the title of Adventurer's Grave to other cities. Players quarreled, and the dialects of various countries could be heard from time to time. Thanks to the language translator with self-learning function of Realm, most players could still roughly understand what they were arguing about. In addition to the small circle, some players proposed different plans, mainly focusing on frontal defense. Some players even raised objections to the understanding of the mission description, believing that the mission might have traps and they needed to be careful. As for what the other party might aim for, most players agreed that it should be the treasure of Dusk City. The adventurers came here secretly to make a fortune. If it wasn't a treasure, it wouldn't matter if Dusk City lost a little, because adventurers were not an army. No matter how powerful they were, they couldn't cause damage to the city, and they would expose their location. The key point was to protect the treasures of Dusk City. Shen Xian thought of 2 ways to solve the problem perfectly. The only thing left was how to deal with the adventurers. As long as they were eliminated, or at least imprisoned, they could be put in prison, and the task would be completed. The difficulty was in catching them, and no fish could slip through the net. He then put the task on investigating the identity of the adventure team, which was easy, because the deeds of the adventurer Belmont were spread all over the continent. For example, he once defeated the 120-level Blood Clan Earl and obtained the epic weapon Moon Wheel. For example, he and his companions once went deep into the cemetery full of undead creatures to find the treasure of the Dwarf Mountain King. It took dozens of minutes for the information to be transmitted through private chat. Belmont himself was a bounty hunter, and the remaining 4 members were Blade Dancer, Holy Crown Priest, Scholar, and Goblin Engineer. They don't have strong defensive power, but they have a variety of characteristics and can retreat calmly. The last time I received information from this adventure team was about 10 minutes ago, 800 kilometers southwest of Dusk City. A dark passage 180 kilometers east of Twilight City. Dolly, if you go further down, there will be no good intersections. There are guards everywhere, and there is only one passage. Have you thought about how to go? A sturdy human turned around and asked anxiously to the goblin engineer who was lying behind him and didn't know what to do. He didn't understand why the goblin was so calm at the critical moment. There were several NPCs standing beside him. They were members of the team, waiting for Belmont's command. Belmont, who was thin, stood at the outermost position, always monitoring the guards who were on high alert, as well as the monsters that could be seen everywhere. At the same time, he had to perceive the traps on the ground and remember the complex maze. As the soul of the adventure team, he shouldered important responsibilities. The goblin engineer was still fiddling with the machine in his hand. The scholar next to him helped him make the magic crystals and devices he needed. Dolly's eyes were very focused, and even had a kind of enthusiasm that only scientists had, because in his hands, an alchemical machine that could allow them to safely survive the guards of Twilight City was about to be completed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 429. It's called Spider Infiltrator No one. Dolly looked at his masterpiece proudly and introduced it to the adventure team members around him. Blade Dancer frowned and said unsatisfiedly, "Why don't you make it look like other monsters, Dolly? Don't you think it's ugly?" Indeed, the goblin continued to show his arrogant nature, but it's because it's ugly that no one will find it. Seemingly surprised by the weird logic of the goblin engineer, Sari beside him ran into the body of the spider infiltrator, which can accommodate 5 people. Driven by magic crystals, the spider will walk freely on any terrain on the cliffs. "Don't move," Dolly shouted in a hurry, "be careful of it exploding, I buried a lot of goblin explosives in it. If something goes wrong, the spider infiltrator can be comparable to a level 9 magic." After listening to his explanation, the remaining team members climbed in carefully, fearing that they would be blown up by the level 9 magic. Even a single level 9 magic could not kill them instantly. A 5 or 6 meter long spider climbed up along the dome above their heads, hanging upside down on it, and headed all the way to Dusk City. Dusk City was waiting seriously, and had prepared enough gifts for these ignorant adventurers. Unfortunately, they seemed to have no chance to taste them. Shen Xian found that Belmont's adventure group had lost their traces, and he couldn't tell what the situation was. If they were simply resting and preparing, then they still had the possibility of completing the mission, but if they sneaked in and the players of Dusk City didn't know about it, things would not be very optimistic. He was still waiting, and the Mage Tower was closely monitoring the surroundings, looking for abnormal things. No one noticed that an alchemical puppet that looked like a real spider quietly ran to their heads. There was a Mage Tower above their heads, but in fact it was not entirely true, because the city structure of Dusk City was complex, so it was easy to find a corner. The spider broke out of the ground, and the 5 adventurers successfully landed. The detection technique did not work, so they immediately put on their cloaks and quietly mixed into the crowd. They gathered near one of the 3 warehouses near the center of the city where Dusk City stored treasures, in a small hotel. "When will we act, boss?" "Wait until we recover." The remaining 4 adventurers did not expect to be dizzy riding on the spider. Now few of them can move and have to lie in bed to rest. They answered Dolly angrily, asking him to be quiet and not to walk around to prevent the news from leaking out. If they could be captured at this time, it would be the best time, but their faces were not recognized at all. After a while, the adventure team started to act again. Belmont looked at the treasure house guarded by guards not far away, which contained more than hundreds of epic and legendary equipment and materials, and tens of millions of gold. It is worthy of being the largest underground city in the north, and few people still think that the Fallen Temple belongs to the category of underground cities. Dolly has a space ring, which contains the exquisite dolls he made, which are like real people and cannot be distinguished without careful observation. However, the puppets will explode, which is equivalent to an 8th level spell, causing 1,300 instant damage and 5,000 continuous damage within a range of 12 meters. Several puppets approached the warehouse, and suddenly, the puppets exploded, killing several guards instantly, and a hole was blown in the warehouse. Even with the magic protection, it could not stop the huge damage. Moreover, once the warehouse was broken, the large amount of gold exposed inside immediately made the passing adventurers feel bad. Encouraged by several brave adventurers, they stole hundreds of units of gold each, and then more civilians joined in and began to loot the things in the warehouse. The adventure team followed them into the warehouse. Belmont skillfully opened the magic locks and entered the inconspicuous secret rooms. There were traces of stacked items inside, but there was nothing. Where did the things go? They were in a panic. According to the intelligence they had investigated in advance, the Lord ordered his subordinates to put the treasures within the range of vision, but now there are none. Are we being deceived? How could it be? Our intelligence is correct, and didn't you notice the fluctuation of magic power? Just now, it must have existed. Did they use teleportation in a despicable way? No, I can guarantee it, Belmont said to his teammates with his keen perception. He showed a little nervousness in his heart. How could the things disappear? He had just used true vision to see them, but suddenly they disappeared. It's too weird. We don't have time. Maybe we've fallen into a trap. Let's go quickly and don't go to the second one. The team members around him couldn't believe it. Could it be that even their strongest adventure team on the continent couldn't break the blockade of Dusk City? At this time, they didn't know that their whereabouts had fallen into the eyes of Miss Yao, who was in charge of surveillance. All guards were mobilized. They must keep these adventurers, and then they can establish the status of Dusk City. Shen Xian stood farther away and guessed how the other party might leave. Generally speaking, under tight defense, the way to come and the way to go are similar. He looked for every possible way, casting his eyes on the 5 adventurers who were running at a leisurely pace, and finally reached their spider lurker. So that's how it is. Shen Xian understood all of a sudden. Not only did the other party have the most concealed means of transportation, but judging from the traces they left when they came, they also took a road that no one thought of. Who would have thought that the other party came from the sky? Moreover, the dome of the earth is like an inverted mountain range, with complex terrain and no way to monitor in detail. Shen Xian appeared in person, and a black shadow suddenly appeared above the heads of the 5 adventurers like a dream, and there were several players or NPCs following closely behind, such as Ant Bing, Tu Jukan, Mist Erlin, and Fule. In the case of Elite against Elite, Belmont had no chance to escape, but unfortunately, they still wanted to play tricks. "You go first. Don't worry about me." As soon as Belmont finished speaking, he drew out a short blade and stabbed Shen Xian in the chest. He thought he could cause some damage to him, but the health value showed that not even 1% of the health value had dropped, and 29,000 damage. Shen Xian and Shadow Dragon released the curse slowly, and a deceleration curse immediately fell on Belmont and others at a frequency of 1 per second. They took out magic props or scrolls to remove it, and then attacks came from more directions. The besieged adventurers were fragile, and the surrounding terrain was not suitable for them to escape. You must know that adventurers at their level have long regarded obstacles as nothing, so for them, the terrain obstacles are completely non-existent. The players who chased them did not attack with all their strength, just wanting to trap them, not to kill them. After a while, the battle was decided. Being controlled by several players, with Belmont's restraint, no matter how awesome the adventurer was, he could not escape. "We surrender." Belmont led his adventure team to choose a truce, believing that the Lord would guarantee their safety. Shen Xian was slightly surprised, and he nodded immediately, "I accept." He quickly ordered the soldiers to capture them and take away all the props, packages, and equipment on their bodies. In this way, no matter how high the level is, a level 130 character can barely fight a level 90 character at most. "But can you tell us where the treasure is?" "Yes, but I'm afraid you won't understand." Shen Xian looked at the dejected adventurers and knew that he was just taking advantage of a loophole in the mission that had no restrictions, and it was a very common loophole. The space ring plus the character offline, the space ring can hold dozens of equipment, and the player's package can hold more than 10 pieces of equipment, and then the player usually stays in the warehouse to confuse. Once there is a situation outside the warehouse, the player inside will immediately go offline, and the equipment will disappear. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 430. The first task was completed, and the second task was under construction, so the third task started immediately. In the Decline Forest 650 kilometers south of Dusk City, half submerged in the bubbling, stinking dead water were large plants like banyan trees, like pillars supporting the sky and the earth, giving people a spectacular feeling. Crocodiles, lizards, and other terrible creatures that can only appear in swamps crawled everywhere in the water. A team of 100 people swept across the avenue like the wind. From a distance, you couldn't see who they were. They all rode nightmares, noble creatures in hell, and their flaming hooves never landed on the ground, as if they were flying. It only took 3 hours for the elite led by Shen Xian to cross the Dusk Hills, the Silent Wasteland, the Decline Forest and all the way to the southernmost Blood Clan Castle Oryx. This is a route suitable for large troops to travel. After buying off official relations, you can travel freely. It is much safer here than walking in a dangerous underground maze. They still need to go south, pass through 4 or 5 areas, and finally go deep into the world of lava on the 4th underground floor. However, at this time, Shen Xian received an interesting news. Hong Huang has dispatched the guild's 283rd action order. The target is also the Chaos Secret Realm on the 4th underground floor. The master of the Kangjian Pavilion of Hong Huang kills 1 person every 10 steps, and the master of the Laha Pavilion, Lanzhou Ramen, personally leads the team and goes deep into the 4th underground floor in 2 groups. Somewhat interested, what is the other party's purpose? Are the 3 rulers of hell who dominate fate tied up things again? Shen Xian opened a notebook called Dark Notebook, which recorded the heroic epics that had been passed down through the ages. At that time, evil united to attack the world of life, wanting to bring all disasters to the world and destroy it. The Lord of Hell Ilkanbela was the terrible demon king known as the Slaughterer of that era. There were many others, because the Dark Age lasted for who knows how many years. The Black Emperor Khazard was another terrible tyrant who had destroyed countless worlds. He was a skeleton, but he had long surpassed the scope of skeletons. Ordinary skeletons were only level 10, and the powerful Skeleton King was only level 90, while the Black Emperor Khazard was level 150, comparable to a godlike existence. He was an undead, and the place where he was sealed was also in the Chaos Secret Realm, this fortress used in ancient wars. In this way, the two sides did cooperate again. Shen Xian led the army with an average level of more than level 90 to continue to move southward, half of which were mixed with the elites of the Gate and WTP. They crossed the Dragon Teeth Bridge, a narrow and strange place with abysses on both sides, about several kilometers long, and an important defensive fortress in the central part of the southern continent. Then there was the Shadow Lake, because the Earth dome above was full of holes, casting a faint light, making the underground world full of the beauty of light and shadow. Then there was the huge stepped frontal mountain. In this vast area of more than 5,000 territories, there were two large cities with a population of more than 300,000 and a total population of 2 million. Further south, it was not far from the Southern City Alliance. Shen Xian's noble status made those who plotted ill dare not act rashly. Dusk City represented a status and an enemy that mortals could not blaspheme. They finally arrived at the magic city of Zikri in the south-central part. This is a strange city with a cross-sectional radius of only 1 kilometer, but it has a lot of layers, like an inverted Tower of Babel that goes deep into the ground, like a unique skyscraper that has been magnified several times. Of course, its architectural style is derived from reality. Patrolling stone puppets can be seen everywhere, because the old dwarf wizards control Zikri. This place is not closed to the outside world. The city with a population of 100,000 has the economy, technology, and military strength of a territory in the late 5th stage. It accepts countless adventurers and allows them to walk freely in the vast underground world. Whether it is a new rookie or a seasoned adventurer, they are all curious about this extremely elite army with at least rare equipment. It is definitely not a mercenary group. Only the elite in a big country can have such terrible and sophisticated equipment. The equipment and props on each soldier cost more than 1 million. Counting the epic and legendary items on the body, how can a small force afford it? They saw countless third-level professions: human, dark elf, barbarian, orc, dwarf, ogre, devil. In short, there are more than dozens of types. Unfortunately, when they wanted to know some more specific information or even wanted to record it, the army disappeared quickly. Their target is the Night Mist Mountains, the alert adventurer shouted at the direction they left, and the old adventurer sighed. This is the second army heading to the Night Mist Mountains this month. On the map of the southern part of the continent, the Night Mist Mountains are dozens of kilometers east of the magic city of Zikri. It is a raised terrain with a size of about 1,700 territories. The terrain is not complicated. It is filled with thick fog that can reduce the field of vision by 90% all year round. The strange thing is that there are strange round fruit-shaped plants that can emit fluorescence in the dark. It is not enough to make the old man sigh, because there are thousands of death unicorns and floating dragons with an average level of 90 living in the mountains. They guard the safety of this place, making it a high-level training point. In the deepest part of the Night Mist Mountains, there is a mine that leads to the mysterious fourth underground floor. The army was stationed near the Night Mist Mountains, figured out the situation, and then began to advance. With a group of high-level troops, there was no difficulty at all, and there was no need for adventurers to look ahead and behind. For them, the fog did not exist, and there was no danger that could stop them. Therefore, along the path that the adventurers had taken, they gradually entered the depths of the Night Mist Mountains. Their sweeping advancement frightened the surrounding players, and few dared to join them. There were only some local lords and brave adventurers on the edge of the Night Mist Mountains. The leveling speed of the country was not too slow, but frequent deaths restricted their range of activities, so that players could only move within this level range. After another 5 or 6 hours of continuous marching, they finally arrived at the mysterious mine in front of them, which was as prosperous as a small town. You can see more than a dozen different entrances, and the buildings exposed outside include complete warehouses, tracks, houses, smelting workshops, foundry workshops, etc., and the architectural style belongs to the dwarves. This was once the land of the dwarves. They tirelessly opened up one mine after another, making the interior of the mine a vast space like a city. To date, there are still millions of units of various ores piled up in the mine, all of which were not taken away by the dwarves when they left in a hurry, and perhaps buried in a collapsed cave somewhere. They groped for traces of undead activities. The contact with Hong Huang is going well, and Shibulet and Xia Yuren agreed to our request to act together. They chose a cleared passage, entered it, and walked deep underground for a long time. Finally, in a wide cave warehouse with an astonishing amount of storage, they saw tens of thousands of neatly arranged undead armies. Shibulet and Xia Yuren was at the front to welcome them. Shen Xian suddenly felt that if he acted with them, by the time they reached the 4th floor underground, Lan Zhou Ramen, who had gone ahead, would have completed the task.